hear the hearing room?
Kim, can you hear the hearing room?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. I could barely hear her.
No, I can help you with that.
I think we're streaming. I think they can hear us.
We can hear you, Carla.
Okay.
So shall we begin?
Please.
Okay,
And you're streaming.
yes. Okay, so welcome to the May 26th Comprehensive Rezoning Update Task Force meeting. We'll go through the roll call. I see we have lots of folks joining us virtually this evening. Al Nickerson.
Here.
Billy Norris. I know that Billy's there. We were speaking earlier.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Mr. Sutton, I can see you. Brian Greenwood.
Here.
Buck, I can see you. Chicky Shawani. Cindy Genther.
Cindy's here.
Hi, Cindy. Saunders, I can see you.
Here.
Joe Hickman.
Here.
Pat Langenfelder.
Here.
Paul Runge.
Here.
Sam Shogi.
I am here.
Okay. I can see Mr. Mason. And Tyler Brown. Tyler with us this evening? Okay. All right. So we have a few changes to the agenda this evening. Summary from our May 12th meeting is still being reviewed, so we will not discuss the minutes from our last meeting. We'll do that the next time we meet.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And do we have any old business to cover? No requests?
If there's any comments by task force members who wish to talk about what we talked at the last meeting, this is the opportunity if there's been any other thoughts.
Okay, hearing none. Under new business, I'm going to let Mr. Mackey explain. I believe we're going to skip over mixed use proposed amendment at this time. But Bill, I'll turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, our first item under new business was the review of the proposal for floating zones and mixed use. I received a request from the applicant who submitted that. Their consultant is not available this evening to be available for the meeting and answer questions and address things, and they requested a postponement, and I'd accepted that postponement, and they will be available on June 9th, so we could schedule that item for June 9th. The staff report on that is the majority of the packet before you. So near the end of the packet is the next staff report. Packets are designed for the web, so these don't have page numbers. I will make sure that I put page numbers in the next packet for the next time. But sort of near the end is the next item, and I believe that the representative for that item is available and is online. At least that was the intent. So this is a review of public request number 5. The request is to allow truck stops, truck parking lots, gas sales, convenience stores, and restaurants with or without drive-through in the industrial district. The staff report was submitted to you all on Saturday. I'm going to read highlights from the staff report. I'm not going to read it word for word. And then the task force can discuss the matter, and we'll move on from there. And again, we will cover the first item on our agenda on June 9th when the requester's consultant is available. So thank you for that. I appreciate that, Madam Chair. So for item number 5 from the public, on September 24th, 2020, McLeod Law Group, representing the Maryland Structural Fabrications Inc., submitted a letter that requested changes to the industrial zoning district. The particular entity owns property in the US 301 corridor, and that property is located southeast of the interchange with Maryland 313 and Galena Massey Road. This request seeks to expand the permitted uses in a single zoning district by including truck stops, truck parking lots, gas sales, convenience stores, and restaurants with or without drive-throughs in that district. Those uses are going to be considered separately in the staff report. Regarding this matter, I want to first look at the comprehensive plan, and the 2018 comprehensive plan does state that the county will support flexibility in the industrial zoning district, especially for those zoning districts located in the Wharton area and in the US 301 corridor, which for this particular request store, they have property in that corridor. Regarding this request, the use truck stops is already permitted by special exception in the commercial and commercial critical area districts, and the use truck parking lots is permitted by special exception in crossroads commercial and commercial districts. For major transportation corridors such as US 301, these uses would be expected, with the exception of a very small area on the southern border of the county. The zoning districts that allow for truck stops, truck parking lots, and even truck terminals are not located near or serve US 301. Looking at some of the other uses they are asking for, the use of automobile service stations is permitted by right in the Crossroads Commercial District and in the Intense Village District and in the Village Zone. These uses are lacking, or these zoning districts are lacking within the US 301 corridor. Convenience stores, another use that they requested, are considered retail sales, and they are permitted in some form in most commercial zoning districts, while the use restaurants without drive-through is permitted in some form in all commercial zoning districts. There is no zoning district in the county where a restaurant with a drive-through is allowed. Such a use would be a completely new use for Kent County. Regarding this matter, providing for truck stops, truck parking, gas sales, convenience retail, and restaurants within the US 301 corridor would provide services for the motoring public and would meet the goal to support flexibility in the industrial zoning district, especially for those districts located in the US 301 corridor. Our recommendation: staff recommends that the task force consider a recommendation to include truck stops, truck parking lots, automobile service stations, but not including repair, retail, and restaurants without drive-throughs as uses that are permitted by special exception in industrial districts located near or adjacent to US 301. And that concludes my staff report for this item.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So comments from the task force or questions?
Yeah, I have a comment regarding the proposed usage. It sounds pretty sprawly to me. When I think of urban, suburban, whatever type of sprawl wants to consider, those are definitely uses that I kind of think about. So I'm not necessarily opposed to it per se. I would like to potentially see some aggressive landscaping requirements, just because a lot of those sites tend to be very unsightly and very uniform. You start to lose perspective on where you are whenever you're driving by any of those types of uses, because they tend to be filled with retailers that are nationwide. and next thing you know, you don't even know you're on the eastern shore of Maryland. It could be anywhere USA. So, not opposed per se, but development like that tends to be very unsightly, and they tend to just bring a bunch of low-wage jobs. So I think we should be very mindful of expanding the overall developable land that's associated with development like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Cindy.
I have a question, and that would be why would we have a restriction to on restaurants without drive-throughs? I guess in retrospect and looking back through the last year, drive-through restaurants, I mean, a lot of businesses look to incorporate drive-through or some kind of pickup service as part of their business model. And I'm wondering why do we restrict drive-throughs as for our restaurants? If somebody could answer that question, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Bill. I wasn't here for the formation of the original zoning code, and I will venture a guess, and maybe Carla can tell me if I guessed right or not. I think that the desire for character, for low impact development, for a certain sort of visual perception may have been the reason for not having drive-through restaurants. They tend to be national brands in some cases, and that may have been part of the impetus for not including those in the code. But that's me sort of looking at evidence without direct knowledge.
Bill, I would concur.
Thanks, Bill.
I would
This
concur
is
with what Bill
Cindy
said.
again. So I can say that, there are a number of folks who look to come to our county as we expand our development opportunities in the route, particularly in the Route 301 corridor. We expect to have additional truck traffic, and I would not be opposed to seeing this type of use to a limited extent in the Route 301 corridor area, because if we don't do it, Cecil or Queen Anne's County will, and they will get the revenue associated with the sales from this type of business, with the tax revenue, with the use, sales and use revenues with it. And I think I would agree with Sam's comment that I think landscaping could be required or recommended to make this a more attractive part of the business plan for a business who's considering moving here. I do not think we should restrict this use.
This is Buck Nickerson. I have a question. Is there a restaurant in Kent County that's actually in the county, that's not within the town limits of Chestertown or Rock Hall or Galena? I can't think of one.
Molly's.
True, perfect.
So this is Sam. I wonder if there's a way that we can potentially strip out some of those uses, considering how we just mentioned Molly's. I think that's the type of development that kind of fits within Kent County, and I certainly wouldn't want to restrict something like that. If we were to lump it in, however, with service stations, and some of the other proposed uses that were just mentioned, that I think is throwing a lot of uses under one category, or at least in this instance, especially to Cindy's comments about restricting restaurants with that drive-through capacity, because now we're kind of about two different styles of restaurants where you have your fast food, but then you also have your sit-down restaurants, and I see those as different uses. I think one is probably more appropriate for the county than the other, in terms of sit-down family-style restaurants that allow for the local charm to be infused rather than cookie-cutter fast food destinations. So, perhaps there's a way that we can, to Buck's question about, is there a restaurant outside of the city limits? And we do have one. And I certainly wouldn't want to see establishments like that restricted.
Madam Chairman, I wonder if we could really consider this properly tonight without looking at the first item on the agenda. If we're going to add, I have no problem with adding truck facilities, truck stops, and parking areas for trucks on the 301 corridor. This area is up near Bram's site. That's the truck entrance for the quarries.
Joe, excuse me. Does anyone else? I mean, you're breaking up very badly for me. Are you? Yeah, and I see some others nodding their heads. So
I'm sorry. Okay, sorry about that. I guess I wondered about reviewing this without reviewing the first item on the agenda. I think our 301 corridor is important in total. There's a plan for floating zones. There's a plan what Millington has. And this, I have no problem. I think it's a great spot probably for truck area parking, because that's the entrance to a good industrial commercial area with Brambles activity up there, and Kent Sand and Gravel and others. But if we open up the industrial to other uses beyond this with restaurants, it'll impact the value. I mean, we've got the same representatives talking about opening up opportunities in Millington for more diverse activities, residential, commercial, et cetera. It just seems like we just open it all up without any plan. We do the disservice to the town of Millington particularly. So I'm not saying the review should include our first item, is my concern. But I'm in favor of the trucks areas. I have no problem with that.
So, Joe, are you suggesting we continue discussion and not come to a final recommendation until we have discussed the previous item?
For me, I thought she said Bill.
No, I said Joe.
It would be my recommendation that the Millington crossroads, the town of Millington, that area be discussed in conjunction with other areas on the 301 corridor. I just hate to have open up restaurants in an industrial area with a truck stop, and then we lose an restaurant. There's only so much capacity on the 301 corridor, believe it or not, that we hurt the Millington area, which is served by water and sewer, and or will have to be, I believe. I think it will have to be. That's my concern. It's one of this total package of 301 corridor. I think it should be discussed in total. There's other areas up there too. I think it all needs to be coordinated in our discussions.
Okay.
This is Tom. But I still think we could talk about whether, at this point, we don't even want to allow a drive-through, period. And I still think we could kind of suggest whether we want that or don't want that, even now. In my opinion, I agree with Cindy. This is 2021. When you look and when you travel, people are going through drive-throughs. I mean, you look in Chestertown, they're going through McDonald's, now going through Dunkin' Donuts. People are tending not to go inside, unless you're going out for an evening for dinner. But those people are not going to McDonald's. They're going to a restaurant somewhere. And this, I look at it as the traveling public. If why can't we capture those people before they get to Middletown?
I agree completely. But why can't we capture them in Millington? We got a whole packet here of development there. If we allow restaurants, zoning is intended to direct development the way we want it. I guess that's my concern. I have nothing to strive.
And I don't care. I mean, I think maybe we need to expand that area in there, whether it's Massey or Millington, rather than restricting it to just that particular area. I mean, we've got two exits, and there's an exit there.
We have, representatives from the same law group representing can be called conflicting because, I'm all for truck stops, I'm all for driving restaurants. Do we want them in the industrial area? It's my question.
Well, I mean, I think my question was more, and this is kind of addressing, do we even want to drive through?
I don't.
I mean, this is saying we don't want to drive through. And I don't know if that's, I
guess we're discussing industrial. That's what I'm opposed to driving. In the other packet, they include restaurants of all types. So we were going to discuss that with the Millington development corridor there.
And I understand that, but I still think we can. I mean, I guess my feeling is we can't keep putting things off.
I wouldn't say it's putting it off. I just think
do we allow drive-throughs or don't we allow drive-throughs?
Well, I mean, is there a problem?
Industrial is my question. That's my question.
Right.
Madam Chair,
Is there a problem if we were to couple this with the discussion on June 9th? Joe's point, just so we can, so we're not putting it off indefinitely, Tom. We're going to put it on the agenda for June 9th and just discuss it.
I don't have a problem.
I agree. I was not going to put it off. We thought we were discussing Millington first.
Right.
When I came to this, this would have been this question. I would have asked the question. We didn't know it wasn't going to be on the agenda.
Yeah, as long as we can continue to address it, and June 9th is fine.
Okay.
I'm okay with it. Okay.
Seem that is anyone strongly opposed to that? That seems to me like a good compromise. To put it on the agenda for June 9th.
We can do that, Madam Chair.
Great.
This is Buck Nickerson. I'm not opposed to what anybody said. As a task force member, I would like to hear what the town of Millington thinks about these proposals because whatever their decisions are going to directly affect the town. It's going to put a load on their water and sewer, their traffic, their tax base, and all of that. And it's I'd really like to hear from town utilities or the mayor or the planning commission, or representative from the planning commission or something to see what the town of Millington's vision is so we can work together on this.
I agree completely, Buck.
And Mr. Nickerson, this is Bill Mackey. I actually met with the town manager of Millington last week before the staff report went out to talk about it and let them know what we were recommending and to confirm that what was represented in the request was correct, that the applicant had worked with their town planner and that they were, in agreement with what was being proposed. And town manager said, there was a resolution about that to authorize that work to be done. She is going to go back and just confirm once more with the folks on their boards that they're for certain behind this. But it was the proposal, the text that you see in the attachment was put together in conjunction with their regular planning consultant, Mr. Johnson. So I'm happy to reach out to them. Buck.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we should move on to the next request.
Wait, Cindy, did you have a question?
Oh,
Hey, this
Sorry.
is Cindy Ganther. I'm sorry, this is Cindy. I just had one quick question. I'm pretty familiar with the zoning in the 301 corridor, and the area that's being considered for the mixed use zoning is not industrial. It's not zoned industrial. The zoning, the properties that are zoned industrial are more so located closer to the 313 Galena Road area. And that though that area seems to be much more conducive to truck stops, truck parking, as opposed to a mixed use commercial and residential area. Those are my only comments, and that was specifically directed to this particular recommendation or this particular recommendation for the industrial zone as opposed to the floating or mixed zone that is closer to the Millington area. This is further north. I'll just mention that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
This is I tend to believe in what Cindy just said. If we're talking two different things and two different zoning classifications and areas, then I don't know why we don't discuss the one we have now instead of putting it off and clouding up the whole proposal for the Millington proper area there. So I'm not sure what the we're talking two totally different locations. So I don't know if anybody else realizes that as well.
Maybe I could clarify my remarks. I understand restaurants are allowed in the commercial area around Millington, but it's a question of what zoning is. If you allow the restaurants in the industrial, it's a question. Do you impact what you're trying to do in Millington? That's what it is. I understand where the industrial is. I understand where the commercial is. It's a question of if you open up all your industrial to other uses, you minimize the value of what we want to do in Millington, where we have water and sewer. That's the question. It's a question that they should be done in concert. I understand they're two completely different zones, and Millington allows the restaurants of uses. That's the question. Whether they're driving or not is kind of immaterial to me. It's a matter of whether you want to open industrial up to food service beyond that would compete with your other intent in the zone, in the comp plan, which wants to put that word Millington. I think it's a great idea to have a truck stop up in Massey. I think it's a wonderful idea. It's a question of what you do with the other uses there.
And I think to Joe's point, since one impacts the other, we understand the differences in both, but one impacts the other. I think we should hold this further discussion until June 9th, so we can discuss it more holistically.
Madam Chair, looking at the agenda, I think we may be able to forego our break this time since it looks like our meeting may be shorter than usual.
Okay, so shall we proceed with streamlining the cottage industry process?
Certainly. This is Carla. I prepared the staff report for this discussion.
Excuse me, Carla, you're breaking up. I don't know if it's for everyone, but
I will. Oh,
That picked me up.
I prepared the staff report for the cottage industry, so I'll just give a brief summary of it. I noted that the land use ordinance, as we all know, accommodates a range of business and commercial activities ranging from home occupations all the way up to industrial manufacturing and processing, and that each one can have a different effect on the surrounding properties, and that home occupations and cottage industries are meant to allow businesses that are smaller with less impact that can be run out of a home. And I included the information about home occupations just to make sure that everybody is clear that within the home level, there are sort of two types of uses. So the home occupation allows for one outside employee, such that somebody who's really truly running a business out of their home. The cottage industry is when that home occupation has grown a little bit, or already starts out bigger and has up to 10 employees, or I guess it's technically less than 10, and takes a little more space.
And
So
so
that's
the
the
cottage
cottage
industry
industry
is
is
the
a
process
process
that
that
requires
requires
a
a
special
special
exception.
exception.
The
The home
home occupation
occupation
just
just
requires
requires
a
a
use
use
permit.
permit.
As
As
far
far
as
as
how
how
the,
the
the process
process
actually
actually
works, it
works,
is a
it's a
special
special
exception that is
exception that is
reviewed by the
reviewed by
Board
the
of
Board of
Appeals,
Appeals,
and
and
that
that
can
can
require up
require
to
up to
three
three
meetings,
meetings,
um,
um,
which is
which
a
is a
recommendation from the
recommendation from the
Planning
Planning
Commission,
Commission,
the review
the
by the
review by
Board of
the Board of
Appeals for
Appeals for
the
the
use,
use, and then generally a
final
final
site plan
site
review
plan
by the
review by
Planning
the Planning
Commission again.
Commission again.
And as I
And as
noted,
I
that
noted,
can
that can
take
take
several months
several
to get
months to get
through.
through.
And
And
I
I
gave
gave
the
the
example,
example,
just
just
not really
not really
using dates,
using
but if
dates, but if
somebody came
somebody
to us
came
on
to us on
January
January
1st and said,
1st
I
and said,
want
I want
a new
a new
cottage
cottage
industry,
industry,
then
then it
it
wouldn't be
wouldn't be
reviewed
reviewed
to the
by
planning
the Planning
commission
Commission
until the
until the
first
first
Thursday
Thursday
in
in February.
February.
The
The
Board
Board
of
of
Appeals
Appeals
meets
meets
on
on
the
the
third
third
Monday
Monday
of
of
each
each
month,
month,
and
and
then
then
the
the
Planning
planning
Commission
commission
would
would
again
again
have
have
to
to
review
review
the
the
final
final
site
site
plan.
plan.
And
And
so
so
again,
again,
it
it
can
can
take
take
3
three
or
or
4
four
months.
months.
So
So as a
to
way to
streamline that
streamline that
process,
process,
we
we
are
are
recommending
recommending
that
that
the
the
task
task
force
force
consider
consider
letting
letting
cottage
cottage
industries be
industries be
special
special
exceptions that
exceptions that can be heard and decided by the
planning
planning
director
director
administratively.
administratively.
Those
Those
hearings are
hearings are
scheduled
scheduled
as
as
needed
needed
and
and generally
would
then would
require a
require a
minor
minor
site
site
plan. So the
plan.
whole
So the whole
process can be
process can be
condensed,
condensed,
but
but it still allows
for
for
that
that
additional
additional
level of
level of
review
review
that may
that
be
may be
appropriate for a
appropriate for a
cottage
cottage
industry
industry to make sure that it's not negatively
affecting the
affecting the
surrounding
surrounding
area or the
area or the
neighbors.
neighbors.
Thank you, Carla.
This is Pat. I have a question about that, about your recommendation. By making, not, does that include a hearing? Neighbors are, made alerted, they get a letter and there's still a hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
So an
So an
administrative
administrative
special
special
exception
exception
is
is
still a
still a
public
public
hearing.
hearing.
It's
It's
reviewed
reviewed
and
and
decided
decided
upon by the
upon by the
planning
planning
director or the
director or
planning
the planning
director's
director's
designee.
designee.
And so
And so
those can be
those can be
scheduled
scheduled
as
as
needed.
needed. For example,
We
we
reviewed
reviewed
a
a
special
special
exception
exception
today
today
that
that
went
went
to
to
TAC
TAC at
the
the
beginning
beginning
of
of
the
the
month,
month,
and
and
we've
we've
already
already
had
had
the
the
public
public
hearing
hearing
for
for
the
the
view. So
view.
it can
So
be
it
a
can
much
be a much
faster
faster
process.
process.
And then
And then
I don't object to be, being a quicker process. I was just making sure that the neighbors are alerted and have the opportunity to speak out in case they want to. That's all. Thank you.
This is Buck Nickerson, and Carla, I like your proposal, and I think to maybe further add to Ms. Pat's question, as far as I know, any administrative variance, a citizen participation plan is required, which means that letters get sent to the neighbors, a copy of the site plan, like say a narrative, a pretty detailed narrative that describes hours of operation, number of employees, size of business, types of services offered, and all of that. I'd like some kind of language in there that said that, if the neighbors were opposed to it, or if there was a lot of opposition, that the planning director could. I really like that it could be administrative variance or special exception. But there are cases where the neighbors come out, they're against it, and face it, some of them are just bad ideas of where it could go to planning commission for a little further scrutiny. I'd also like to see if leave it to the planning director's discretion to waive the bonding for stormwater management and for landscaping. When you're starting up a business, money's thin, and sometimes, as this goes through the process, the landscaping is already done really before, if you're going to get final approval, and putting up another couple $1,000s for landscaping is money you just don't have. And like in my example, my business is in my front yard, so we wanted it to look attractive, because when we look at the front of the house, it's what we see. So I think there are opportunities where the bonding could be waived.
we can certainly look into that.
Other questions or comments on streamlining the process?
Kim, are we to be making a motion on this at this point?
We're not really making motions. We're trying to build consensus around this. So I think we just want to hear from folks if they're in favor or if they're strongly opposed. I think if we don't hear too much discussion, can interpret that as favorable. Cindy.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. Anyway, so I think this is excellent. This is a wonderful suggestion. I applaud staff for their recommendation. I think expediting a process is helpful for all of our folks who consider starting a business. I also, by the way, agree with Buck's comments that we revisit bond requirements and make that as well a part of this recommendation going forward. So I agree.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, it seems we have a favorable consensus to consider this. And Bill or Carla, I think we could move on to our next request, which is really about timelines.
Correct. So the next request was sort of a task force request that we review timelines and see if there's something to do about the way that there could be a short turnaround time between meetings, and the staff request to standardize the notices to sort of one timeline. As you can see in the staff report, there are 4 types of projects that have processes and timelines outlined in the land use ordinance. They are subdivisions and lot line adjustments, site plans, special exceptions, and then variances and waivers. Each one of them is slightly different. And we attach to the report sort of a chart that we have developed to help us stay straight, because we have some things that require 10 days notice, some things that require 20 days, and some things 15. We have different standards on whether it's a requirement to post a property or just a policy to kind of be a good neighbor. I did note in the staff report that technically that 20-day submission deadline for, I believe, site plans and subdivisions is only required for the first submittal, and technically isn't required for subsequent submittals. Major subdivisions and major site plans can have 3 levels of review. They can go from concept, preliminary, and final. It's at the discretion of the department whether any of those phases get combined. We do often combine preliminary and final, but not always. Although over time it has become a policy that it's everything must be submitted 20 days in advance. We agree that there definitely needs to be some changes. However, it's going to take more research and effort to actually come up with what is going to be a good way to do that. And so we are looking for if you have any suggestions, but we're also asking that you allow us to work with the consultant to draft revisions that will both clarify the steps that are required and find a consistent timeline that will work.
Thank you, Carla. Any
Carla, this is
suggestions or
Buck.
questions?
Oh,
But-
this is Buck. I had a suggestion after I was thinking about this a little more. The first, like if we're submitting a major site plan, for example, and it's fresh to planning staff, fresh to planning commission and all that. I totally understand the 30-day or 25-day submittal time for everybody to get their teeth into it. But if there are maybe just some minor revisions to be made or something to go back to the next step, that's maybe then is when you shorten up to a 10-day or a 15-day, something like that. And maybe you could stagger them and say, okay, well, concept, you need 20 days, preliminary, you need 15, and then for final, a 10-day. And that, if it was preliminary final, you could just do the 15-day. I think that would be acceptable, in my opinion, anyway.
So that we will, we definitely need to figure out a way to make it both easier on applicants, but also still usable by staff. And so you're right, it might require that the initial submission takes more time, but we also have to make sure that we don't make something so confusing that staff can't follow what the timelines are supposed to be. And I think that's how we ended up with everything being 20 days. Is that staff just was looking for a way to kind of structure and know exactly what they were supposed to do when, and not have to always be going, okay, is this project 10 days? Is this no notice? Is this posting? And just treat everything as that sort of initial review. And I agree, it has made hardships both at the staff level and for the applicant.
Understandable.
Other questions or suggestions from task force members?
Yeah, this is Sam. I just want to say that this is one of the things that I'm most excited about seeing kind of get revised and ultimately improved. Because universally, it's one of I would say the biggest pain point among a lot of our developers, engineering firms, and I'm excited to see this done. I'd like to make a recommendation that we also work with some type of designer once we do settle on a final process, because ensuring that the staff has the ability to kind of understand the timeline with regards to each specific project, but also the individual or the applicant, just because kind of when someone's explaining the process to you, you tend to kind of nod your head in the moment, but by the time you then get back and you review your plans and putting it all together then gets a little bit confusing. So having some type of designer to potentially help translate that overall timeline into something that can be digested among the applicant, I would also go a long way. But that's later down the road and just a suggestion that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I think that's a great idea. Like a flow chart or a process map, some visualization of the process, I think would be helpful for both the applicants and staff.
Agreed.
Any other comments, suggestions from task force? Okay, hearing none, I think we should open it up to see if there's any public comments. So anyone in the general public, can't tell if there's additional people in the meeting room, but
can we have some people in the meeting room who are coming forward
okay,
to make
great.
comments?
Great. Now, Carla, I guess we will not see them, right? Or
it doesn't look like we're going to need a break tonight.
Right. Okay. So if you could just state your name and then let us hear from you.
This is Elizabeth Watson. I'm a planner and resident of Chestertown. And thank you for the opportunity to comment. I want to reinforce, I just have a few comments on the general discussion. I want to reinforce Sam Shuggy's emphasis on aggressive landscaping. I thought that was a really excellent comment. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you, Elizabeth.
Yeah. So the idea that we're something special, I think when people drive down 301, they really see that just now. So as we see changes, and I think for the benefit of the county, the traveling public, our residents, truckers, others, those services are needed in that area. So, really working on how that's going to look is important. And I do think that thinking through the restaurant issue, we really need to make sure that as much of our services are available to our residents close in Millington and Massey. Truckers don't need drive-throughs. We all do, I think. But we get it. We can do drive-throughs in Chestertown or elsewhere where these are being established in the towns. So I think both Massey and Millington could accommodate that if Massey can service it. And people go to other states out there. They got another place to go, or they can go over to the truck stop. Or I can see there would need to be a restaurant or truck stop out on 301. Good signage would help with that, so the traveling public can find their way into Millington and into Massey and get those services. I would like to see. I also applaud the cottage industry discussion. I do think there's a little bit of a trap for your planning director and your planning staff, and that is that you need to be very clear on when they decide to administratively approve and when they need to go to the planning commission. You need to think that through a little bit more. It's not clear in the notes here on how that would work. It may be that the cottage industry size, if there was a size issue, 9 employees is a lot. So maybe you could step down and you could say, well, if you're up to 5 employees, and just suggesting that is one possible way of thinking about how do you separate, shall we say, the sheep from the goats, which are the ones that ought to go to the planning commission, and not before we find out through public hearing that there's some controversy, but really giving some judgment ahead of time so that the staff have some backing in terms of how they make their decisions. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Hi, this is Janet Christensen Lewis, Millington. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Janet.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to start with the cottage industry since that's the same thing that thing that came up first. Definitely, we know that economic development is much more likely to occur within the county by encouraging residents that already live here to increase rather than trying to attract the next big thing from the outside. So whatever we can do for the cottage industry, I think is a great idea. And the flow chart here was really interesting. But I do have one comment. I think that the public notice seems to be in disarray as to, and I think that is really important that be strengthened, particularly if you're going to go to something where the planning director is making the decision. And there needs to be criteria whereby which the planning director can make that criteria. And I think all of those things can be done without having it be burdensome on the cottage industry itself. But I do think that you have to be aware that if you're going to bring in 10 employees and you're pretty close to another property, it has an impact. It has an impact on the amount of people coming and going. And that really, the neighbors really need to know about things like that. And then, I'm sorry, when you're talking about the planning commission, that's the one that needs to be strengthened for public notices as well. There doesn't seem to be too much there. And then I want to also support Sam Shoki's position. We don't want your 301 corridor coming into Kent County, which will become a gateway to look like Route 40 up in Cecilton or Cecil County, where you have just this sprawling, I mean, it's not particularly attractive. So that really needs to be designed in a way that it's not going to impact visually. People aren't going to go by and think Kent County looks like that. They're going to go by and say, oh, Kent County looks interesting. And it's done a really nice job in its design here. And one of the things that make it be the best is if we have drive-ins, which I do, I don't go to them, but I'm not opposed to them, but they don't line the corridor, that the drive-ins get pushed out. I mean, one of the major concerns for Millington is that if you put all this development, Millington development in the annexation outside on 301 corridor, Millington will become a ghost town. It will be dead. And so the more that you can make sure that the development that happens from Millington to the 301 corridor extends the town of Millington, the better off you're going to be. And so I think you have to be careful. I also think that things have to be incorporated that you haven't even talked about here: pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, forest conservation. I mean, there's a big push at the state right now. There was a bill that was passed. They're looking at the corridors and hubs. Definitely has to be part of the conversation going forward. And also transportation. Kent County has extremely poor transportation. And if you're going to develop this large area, it needs a transportation plan before you can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Are there other public comments?
Kim,
And there's nobody else in the room who wishes to comment, but I don't know if there's anybody online. This would be the time for them to make a comment as well.
Madam Chair, I would just add, if anyone's listening to the live stream and wants to call in and make a comment, that number's in the agenda. It's 1-872-239-8359. And the conference ID is 880-749-131#.
Let's just give a minute or two to see if anyone wants to join us by calling in.
Excuse me. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
This is Tyler Brown. I've been on the line. I think I just had my line muted, so I just wanted to let you know I was here.
Hi, Tyler. Yes, nice to hear from you.
All right. How are you?
Good, thanks. Anyone on the line that wishes to offer comment? Okay, hearing none, and we can always come back if someone does join us. Are there any additional comments from the task force? James, do you have a comment? You just became... I think you're muted.
No, I don't have a comment.
Okay. Okay, so hearing no further comments, we're going to move on just to see if there's any research requests from the task force or planning staff.
Madam Chairman, I was hoping we could get a look at an end result of what our consultant has done for small rural counties and others. It would help with what Sam was saying, seeing flow charts, seeing how it looks. A lot of us are visual people. If we can see what it looks like, it may, codify some of the questions I have about this process. So if we could get a copy of that, it'd be great, of something they've done in a small rural county. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, I actually have 3 examples to provide. I didn't want to provide, they provided them at the end of the week. I didn't want to provide them along with everything else. So I will forward those tomorrow, sir.
Excellent. I just want to thank Mackey and Carla for giving us very comprehensive agenda, including references to the land use ordinance so that we can all participate more fully in the discussion.
Thank you.
And the next item on the agenda, just reminding everyone, and I guess, Bill, on June 9th, we'll be talking about issues related to towns and villages as well as economic.
I think we're going to try to have a few of those. We're sort of, with the staffing shortage, being down 3 members of staff, it's hard to get through everything, and I had perhaps a more aggressive dream than I'm going to be able to fulfill. So we'll try and have some of those items, but that is the goal, to cover some of the things that would relate to towns and villages. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we do understand you're short staffed, so we hope you're having some luck in the interview process.
Thank you.
And if there's no further items or comments, wait, Tom, please. Oh, Tom, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
There's a questionnaire that's been put together that I don't know if it was in an email.
Yes, sir.
But I don't know whether you want to mention that, and if we should put a timeline on it for the task force members to have that back. I think that would be good, so that way, it doesn't linger on.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great suggestion. There is a questionnaire was mailed today. It goes through each of the items and allows you all to decide sort of, yes, you agree with the item and it doesn't need further discussion. No, you don't agree with the item and it doesn't really need further discussion. Or yes, you want to discuss the item further and we should do a staff report and schedule it. And then that'll help us put together a schedule for over the summer to have to do 56 staff reports on items when some of them might not need further discussion is a lot of work for us. So that questionnaire is literally went to the post office today. There's an envelope where when you're done, you can fold it in half, stick it in. It's all stamped and ready to go, and just send it back to us. If you all can do that within the next, hopefully it arrives at your homes or places of business within the next couple of days. If you can get that back to us as soon as possible, that'll help us be able to decide what things you all want to talk about more and be able to put together a schedule and an agenda. So I don't want to necessarily set a hard date because I know the mails are a little squishy. So, but thank you.
Well, I just think it was a good idea in that with the planning staff being short-staffed, if there's something there that everyone's in agreement about, there's no need to staff going through a lot of research if it's not an issue. And somewhere we are short-staffed, and I think we've got to give credit to Bill and Carla for they're doing over and beyond trying to work the task force and then their regular jobs, the regular work with their jobs, and it's anything we can do to make it streamline it some, I think would be would be helpful to them.
Thank you, sir. Very much. Appreciate it.
Albert Nickerson, how are those questionnaires going to be evaluated? In other words, is it majority, or if one person says they want to continue discussion?
I figured I would see what came back.
Okay.
We're trying to do things by consensus. So if it's clear that there's a consensus surrounding an item, then we'll go with the consensus.
And I think I could just mention, they don't want any names on. This is not that way. This would be completely, no one's going to know what anyone else said. It will be public record. So, that's another reason not to put your name on it. But you don't, that way you don't have to have a fear that someone else isn't going to like me because I did this, or, that type of thing. I just think maybe it'll help the whole process.
Thank you. And then after that, I'm hoping that we can have a more succinct list, put together a schedule that's a doable schedule, and then we can publish that schedule so people know what's coming when, etc. So we're going to try to organize things by chapters in the comp plan as much as possible. So to give it that context that I know is so important. So thank you.
It sounds like we have a great plan. So I'm going to recommend that we adjourn the meeting. All those in favor? Okay. Any opposed? All right, so we'll adjourn the meeting and see you all in 2 weeks. And thank you. Have a great evening.